When I surf through real estate videos on YouTube, I regularly see 7 different rumors perpetuated as fact in various forms of hype porn. Discussion of these rumors has been ongoing for years, so today I want to put them all to rest. This video debunks 6 of those rumors and confirms one. If you stick with me through each rumor, you'll have a better understanding of the housing market than all those YouTube creators that continue to stir the pot with ignorant hype. Each rumor attempts to explain why a housing apocalypse is brewing. They warn of coming foreclosure wave, the collapse of the housing market due to sky-high mortgage interest rates, and the collapse of home prices because what goes up must come down. Others claim the end of the home affordability due to sky-high prices, the forming of a new housing bubble due to historic home sales figures during COVID, or builders today are building more homes than the market can absorb. Finally, a few point out that institutional investors will soon flood the market when they shed their inventory of unwanted homes. All of these points serve to deliver fear to raise viewer attention levels, but only one is confirmed with the data that is readily available on the internet today. Rumor number 1, the foreclosure wave is forming to destroy home prices. To find a potential wave of foreclosures, it is best to examine the current pipeline of loans and specifically the status of all delinquent loans. Our first graph segments mortgage delinquencies by severity. Mortgage delinquency trends are very positive, with the worst delinquencies showing huge declines and only new delinquencies showing gains. Of course, the foreclosure moratorium was lifted in January, so it's not a big surprise to find loans 30 and 60 days delinquent on the rise. This is a very important point that most YouTubers either fail to understand or perhaps purposely overlook in their reporting. Banks were not allowed to foreclose on the majority of home loans that were delinquent during the pandemic until recently. So if a foreclosure wave was heading our way, we would have seen a huge number of foreclosure filings beginning in January. But we did not. And here is why. The total number of delinquencies in all categories are now below pre-pandemic levels, and this should not be a surprise to our longtime viewers. I told you 2 years ago foreclosures would not be a threat to the housing market for one simple reason. From 2006 through 2014, there was no equity in the housing market. Simply put, Americans owned more on their homes than the homes were worth. If a homeowner became delinquent, there was no solution that made lenders whole again. Foreclosures resulted in losses to the borrower and to the lenders too. But the equity situation has reversed today. There is equity again in the housing market, and more so than at any time in the past. For the majority of borrowers who become delinquent today, the remedy does not have to be a foreclosure sale. Instead, delinquent borrowers can sell their homes on the open market, repay their debt, and many will walk away with equity. The continuing rumor about a foreclosure crisis has been debunked. Rumor number 2. Recent sky-high demand makes today just like 2006. A new housing bubble must be forming. When mortgage interest rates plunged lower right after the onset of COVID in the US, home sales surged. Just how frenzied was the housing market? To find out, let's compare the number of homes sold over the past few years with sales going all the way back to 1990. This graph shows total home sales each year plotted against the growing U.S. population going back to 1990. As you can see, home sales did push higher in 2020 and 2021, but I can hardly call that total number of sales sky high. Most people do not even realize how normal those 2 years were for the number of homes sold in the U.S. 2021 was the 5th highest year for home sales, while 2020 ranked 7th. This is not evidence of a market out of control. Considering that the population has grown by more than 12% since the last market peak, I would argue that our sales were far too low. The 36.4 million new Americans need a place to live too. And why were sales so low when we had historically low mortgage interest rates? Any realtor on the ground will tell you there was not enough inventory of homes for sale for the demand in the market. Had there been 3 million to 5 million more homes, we would have seen significantly more homes sold and much lower levels of appreciation. It was the undersupplied market that slowed sales. Now, if you're a longtime subscriber of my channel, then you know I bring up today's historically low inventory level all the time because the supply and demand dynamic determines how home prices will move. And if you're not a subscriber, please click the thumbs up like button and subscribe now so that you get all my new content when it is fresh. If you want to know what's going on in housing, to see and hear the data explained, to evaluate the facts and ignore the hype porn that is so prevalent online, then subscribe now, and I'll keep you in the know. As for the topic of a housing bubble, most self-proclaimed real estate experts fail to understand that a bubble forms when supply continues to expand while demand declines. Since our current supply level is historically low, it might be a while before we can lay claim to a new housing bubble. Rumor number 2 is busted. Rumor number 3, high mortgage interest rates will collapse the housing market. There is no doubt that the jump in mortgage interest rates has cooled demand in the housing market. Buyer activity has declined significantly since the first quarter, when mortgage interest rates were nearly 1/2 of what they are today. This graph plots the total number of homes sold yearly, 2022 is an estimate, against mortgage interest rates. Note there were 18 years where mortgage interest rates were higher than today, and the 8 years highlighted in green had higher mortgage interest rates and more homes sold than we'll have in 2022. Buyers will eventually acclimate to the higher rates, which are still 30% below the 50-year average. Let me repeat that. While today's rates are much higher than last year's, they are still 30% lower than the average rate from 1971 through 2021. Old people like me still consider today's rates very low. Something that many of the self-proclaimed real estate experts fail to understand is that when buyers leave the market, so do many sellers. In today's housing market, where only 10% of the inventory comes from new home construction, most buyers have homes to sell. If a buyer leaves the market, she takes a listing with her. So yes, rising mortgage interest rates mean declining demand, but it also means declining supply, and our supply of homes remains near all-time low. Higher mortgage interest rates will cool demand in 2022 and most of 2023, but as the new normal kicks in, we'll see buyers return to the market if they can afford the homes. I wouldn't be surprised to see an uptick in sales next year, fueled by growth in institutional investors adding to their inventories. Rumor number 4, home prices have to fall because they've been rising fast. They say what goes up must come down. Of course, they don't know what they're talking about. This graph plots 80 years of average home prices in the U.S. During that time, homes averaged a 5.2% growth rate each year. Only in 7 of the past 80 years did home prices fall, and 5 of those came in the 5 years from 2007 through 2011. The other 2 were insignificant. People expecting home prices to fall should first study the supply and demand for homes. Today, we're near an all-time low in the supply of homes in the U.S. I've seen estimates that show the lack of construction of new homes has left the market between 2.5 and 5 million homes short. So why are so many people expecting home prices to fall? It's recency bias. Recency bias is a natural habit of favoring or valuing recent events over historic ones. In simple terms, we often give greater importance to the most recent events in our lives. Most adults remember the housing bubble bursting in 2006, but do they remember the run-up in home prices in the early 1940s that was never followed by declining home prices? How about the early 1960s, where home prices moved much higher all the way until 1991, when a mere 1.3% decline was recorded, only to continue higher for another 15 years? There will be price corrections here and there in different markets, but overall, we're going to see home prices continue higher because the supply of homes for sale and rent is too low for our growing population. When supply is depressed, prices and rents must move higher. What goes up must come down. Is that what you saw in that graph? Not me. I saw 80 years of prices moving higher at an average clip of 5.2% annually. Rumor number 5, there are too many new construction homes being built. Well, the U.S. population has grown roughly 70% since 1968, yet we're building fewer homes than we were back then. Does that make any sense to you? Any surprise there's nowhere to live for tenants and homebuyers today? This graph plots the number of new housing units completed each month with a blue dot. The blue line shows the 12-month average, while the red line shows the 10-year average. Follow the red line. Look how far it has dropped. Recently, our population growth percentage has slowed, but there is still growth. And each year, several 100,000 homes are demolished, so builders need to bring enough homes for the additional people and replacements for the demolished homes. That just has not happened over the past 15 years. Home builders have struggled to bring homes to the market recently due to rising material costs, wage increases, and the COVID supply chain disruption. With inflation rising, we know that builders will never again be able to produce homes at pre-COVID prices, meaning the bulk of homes needed cannot be produced by home builders today. I keep a close eye on building permits, housing starts, and new housing completed, and I'll be sure to let you know when I feel a major corner has been turned by builders. I'm just not buying into the hype on new construction yet. This year ranks as only number 16 out of the past 64 for the number of new housing starts, so I'm not going to get too excited about an oversupply of new construction anytime soon. Rumor number 6, institutional investors are dumping homes and will flood the market. Many YouTubers claim the large institutional investors of single-family homes will be dumping their inventory for fear of falling home prices. I believe these concerns are voiced by people who are not paying attention to the large investors involved in buying homes. Many iBuyers, like Zillow, have stopped buying homes, but they hold very few properties when compared to the overall market. All the holdings of all the iBuyers can only help the depleted supply side of the housing market when they are ultimately listed for sale. This graph depicts the current breakdown of the homes in the U.S. Note how you cannot even see the plot of institutionally owned homes, nor those owned by the largest investor of homes. For the time being, the 300,000 institutionally owned homes are a very tiny subset of the overall U.S. housing market. There's a growing segment of large institutional investors that are buying homes to rent, not to flip. You see, the smart money sees the upside in home prices and home rents due to the inability of home builders to bring affordable homes to the market. Currently, institutional investors only own about 1/5 of 1% of all single-family homes and just 1% of rental homes, according to recent data presented to the U.S. Senate by the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation also pointed out that in no state do institutional investors own more than 1 in 100 of all available housing. But that does not mean institutional investors are irrelevant. These substantial home-buying investors seek long-term holdings because they know that rents are soaring and will continue to soar so long as homebuilder production is stalled. The smart money is buying homes today, and I believe institutional investors will be adding to their inventories at an alarming rate. I would argue that institutional investors are creating more of a problem keeping us undersupplied than they are a threat to oversupplying the market. Rather than releasing the homes they have, which are needed, they continue to buy more homes, which is increasing competition among buyers and pushing up prices. Who can afford to compete with a hedge fund when bidding on a home? This rumor is busted too. Rumor number 7, home affordability is tanking. The 7th and final rumor we'll explore today is no rumor at all. Home affordability is tanking. This graph plots the relative change in monthly mortgage payments, inflation adjusted, for the past 35 years. I combined historical average monthly mortgage interest rates, the monthly home price index that accounts for price changes over time, and the consumer price index to adjust real monthly mortgage payments to ones relative to the current inflation rate. The red line plots the Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index, where the January 2000 price is set to 100 and changes before and after are factored similarly. In other words, the red line shows the relative home price movement since 1987. The blue line takes the home price information from the red line and then adjusts it with the inflation data. It shows that today's buyer is paying more for a home than ever before, even after adjusting the price with today's high inflation. The gray area in the graph plots the inflation-adjusted relative mortgage payment that buyers are making, and today's mortgage payment is the highest on record. In fact, it's more than 104% higher than what buyers were paying 11 years ago in 2011. The result of rising home prices and elevated mortgage interest rates has pushed home affordability to an all-time low. The housing market has been carried by historically low mortgage interest rates and depressed home prices due to the housing bubble collapse 15 years ago. Today, the bubble is gone, inventories are low, prices are soaring, and we no longer get sub 3% interest rates when we borrow money to buy a home. The near historically low inventories are not just hurting home prices, as we have seen rental rates rise at double-digit year-over-year percentages for more than a year. In the past, when home affordability fell, many people just chose to rent. Unfortunately, rents are no longer affordable either. Sadly, I have to confirm that this is probably the worst time in history to rent or buy a home due to the limited supply of homes that has resulted in soaring prices and rents. At a time when the U.S. needs more homes in all but a rare few local housing markets, inflation has the cost of building materials up nearly 50% in the past 2 years alone. How can builders come in and build the less expensive homes that we need when their costs are soaring? Unless we see a miraculous decline in the cost of building materials, builders will not be producing the number of homes our inventory-starved market needs to cool down home prices. Home affordability is the biggest issue in real estate today. It is time for mainstream media to make it a priority so that people make smarter decisions for their housing needs now and in the near future. My advice remains unchanged for our viewers. If you must make a move, sooner will be better than later. On the other hand, if you own a home that will serve you well for many years, then this talk of home affordability means very little to your personal needs. Just know that your home is growing equity nicely, and if history is a good teacher, you should know that you'll be beating inflation soundly with your real estate investment. If you want to see a video featuring my 9 tips for buying a home in a highly competitive market, you can view it by clicking on the box in the top left corner of your screen. To see a popular video featuring my top 6 home selling tips, just click on the box below it. Please remember to like this video, check out the links below it, and subscribe to our channel so that you never miss anything.